The Irrational Confidence Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and it is the end of week number 6, a crazy, wild weekend in college football. Upsets galore. Some teams really starting, as Randy Savage once said, the cream rises to the top there, baby. I'm loving this. I'm joined by my co-host, the man who's always been on top. My co-host, Fresh. How you doing, buddy?
Paps, Saturday was the song of the South. Got to be ready any given Saturday. Definitely a Dixieland delight when Bama and Tennessee lose, much less to ranked opponents. That is a love in the first degree that anyone can commit to. You just got to roll on your 18-wheeler and get back home and regroup and move on to next week. Saturday was mountain music to millions of people. It looks as if, like right now outside of Texas and Ohio State, everybody else has questions. If you're going to beat Texas or Ohio State, make sure, you're going to need more than a fiddle, to come through and get that W. First day ever, multiple AP top 5 SEC teams lost to ranked opponents. This is a fantastic, joyous day. If you're on the outside looking in and seeing your rivals go down, and if you're one of those fan bases that pulled off that win, tear down the goalposts, celebrate. And if you got beat, it just shows you've got to bring it every single Saturday, no matter what. Strap up, not just in the SEC, but anywhere. Big Ten. We saw in the ACC last night. You've got to show up and be ready to play. These kids are competing at a high level, and you've got to be mentally focused. And if you're not, you're going to get beat. And all that trash field talk on Twitter and specials boards gets bookmarked and comes right back, and we have an amazing cycle. Feinbaum is going to be fantastic this week, so I think if you want to tune in, turn on SEC Network every single day and watch the call-ins, because that's going to be absolutely hilarious. But it's just, wow, what a Saturday. What a Saturday.
We got so much to get to. We got a jam-packed show for you guys here today. But hey, just real quick, before you do anything else, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, get notified, because as great as week number 6 was, week 7 is absolutely a monster. It's one of the special weekends we have in college football. This is a really, really good weekend coming up. So don't miss a single preview game. Don't miss our reaction episodes. So hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, interact with us on the socials, leave us comments, all of that fun stuff. But Fresh, away we go. I'm going to tell you, man, as you guys know, I occasionally will make some professional wrestling references on the show, and one of my favorite people ever to quote is the late great American Dream Dusty Rhodes. You'll always see when we talk about TCU games, I'll say, let's get funky like a monkey, baby. And last night, Dusty Rhodes' kid is named Cody Rhodes, and for those of you who don't, he has a really great entrance song. It's called Kingdom by Downstraight, and I legitimately think that Vanderbilt was listening to a professional wrestling entrance when they got in, because they took Alabama to the woodshed for 4 quarters. Now everyone's going to look and go, oh my goodness, Vanderbilt upsets Alabama, and it must have been like Alabama just played horrible. No, Alabama played fairly good in that game. Vanderbilt played lights out. I mean, those boys were jacked up. Now, don't be interviewed for the first time, not like it's your first time, and not drop F-bombs on live TV there. I don't know if you saw that.
Man. Exciting moment. Own the moment.
Exciting times. But with that being said, we put this out on Twitter. Where does the Alabama upset by Vanderbilt rank in the pantheon of all-time college football upsets? One of the guys on Twitter that responded to our poll said it is top 3. We had 37% vote top 3. He said that only Boise over Oklahoma and App State over Michigan were the 2 better upsets than this one. Over 50% of the people that responded to our poll out there on the X were over 50% said it's top 5 of all time, Fresh. Fresh, where does this upset rank for you? It's a tough question.
I would say top 3, because you got to look at the way this is. The App State one, I think, is going to be number one all time, period, end of story. I actually think this might be number two because, and bear with me, the Oklahoma Boise State was a bowl game. You can make the argument, well, it was the Fiesta Bowl, nobody really cares, no national championship on the line. So did Oklahoma fully give their all? You can't really make that, statement here. It's truthful, but it was a chance for Boise State to shock the world, and they did it. In this game, you're coming off of a first half where you absolutely eviscerated the Georgia Bulldogs. It was 30-7 at halftime. You had destroyed them up and down the field, do whatever you want. The dogs couldn't tackle, dogs couldn't cover. You went up, down, left, and right on them. In the second half, with the way Brian Denny was all just raucous and everything's like, oh, we blew them out. We don't need Saban. We're better than Saban. The dogs tricked back into that second half, made it a ball game, took the lead. And if it's not for that amazing athletic play by Ryan Williams, they could have actually lost that football game. It would have been the most monumental choke of all time.
Right.
So you come down from that. You're like, oh, we got to, we talk about mindset, looking ahead. Well, in this case, I don't think they even looked ahead. There was like, it's Vanderbilt, whatever. We just beat one of the best teams in the country at home after an amazing comeback. We're loving ourselves, roll tide this and roll tide that. And they got punched in the mouth right off the bat, and they didn't know how to respond. They were not jacked up. They kind of walked in now, whether that's Nick Saban not holding the team accountable, the team not truly respecting themselves. There was something lost there. And never seen a Nick Saban team do that, where they would go into a game after a big W and just flat out, throwing away. Especially against a lower opponent. Like fans, let's be serious, folks. Vanderbilt's not a football powerhouse, but they do have SEC talent. They're getting recruits. They're getting 3 stars and maybe a couple 4 stars. They're not getting 5s and 4s. But they have legitimate talent to play, but they had to put it all together. They've always had an issue of where's the depth. You saw an entire team buy in last night. The depth issues, whatever, guys playing for each other and put it all on the field with the coaching staff and for each other. And they took advantage of an opportunity where Alabama maybe stepped back a couple notches, wasn't focused, and before they knew it, they were in dogfight. And then Pavia, who has beaten Auburn, has beaten Alabama now, owns the entire state of Alabama for that matter, is an inspirational leader that kept the guys going. And that just momentum carried it where Milroe and Williams and that offense just couldn't score enough points. They couldn't keep going. I think it was 2 for 7 on third down. They had the ball for 14, maybe 15 minutes. So they never had the football. They couldn't convert on third downs. And Vandy just wore them down physically at the line of scrimmage. Maybe they were beat up the week before and they weren't fully recovered physically to be able to handle it in a matchup where another physical team kept hitting them. But that's kind of what you saw in that ball game, where it's just, they weren't ready to play. And in any league, any game, you've got to be ready to show up. And especially against lower teams, you got to strike early, get hot, build a lead, and then coast from there. Don't let that team hang around at home. Even if you have 60% of the crowd as your own team, you've got to be able to get after them early and keep that momentum, keep that mindset of an upset in the rearview mirror. Same kind of thing with Tennessee and Arkansas, where they just couldn't score early. They let Arkansas hang around, and Arkansas just made the ball game, kept dragging it out, and they won in the end. This is a number 2 all-time win because Alabama's a brand. You're coming off the biggest win, and they just were not focused, and it shows. You've got to show up. I'll give it number 2.
Right. And with this one here, the fact that impressed me is that Vanderbilt was able to do whatever they wanted with this game. They were able to move the football, get the first downs. Like, I was waiting for Alabama's defense just to completely put a stranglehold on the Vanderbilt offense at some point, and it never happened. It never happened. And again, I'm driving home at the end of this game, listening to the game on the radio here, that was even better. Like, because we were listening to the Vanderbilt feed for this game, and props to the Vanderbilt radio hosts on that, because they really painted a great picture, and just the excitement that you could feel. You could feel the energy come across the radio that was going on in Nashville last night. It was an awesome game for them. Fresh, this is top 3 for me. I'll kind of agree with you as well. I think that App State Michigan game, just because that was so unbelievably unexpected, and it ends with a blocked field goal. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably number 1 of all time. This is a very close number 2. I get it. Vanderbilt does have a little more talent than they're used to, but they're still, by public perception, they're still Vanderbilt. They're still the bottom feeder of the SEC. But what we're noticing across the country right now You take a look at what Indiana's doing, what Rutgers did up until this weekend. Take a look at what Vanderbilt is doing, 3-2 on the year. They, a couple weeks ago, frauds, Missouri, and what they did to them. You would see this. Things are changing in these lower level programs there. But
actually, a point to that.
Oh, go ahead.
It's as much as we talk about NIL being a good and a bad thing, and sometimes there's a little too much greed. And the transfer portal can be causing chaos, and maybe you load up too much of your team from the portal, like Florida State. But if you can go out and pluck and get right players here and there who want to keep working and building up, kids from Division II, Division III, FCS programs want to jump up and get into that Power 5, league. You're seeing kids who have talent who've developed over years. They weren't elite players out of high school. They've gotten better over time, and now they're transferring up at the right moment and getting a chance to showcase at the highest level, like Rourke at Indiana, Pavia here at Vanderbilt. These guys, we're trying to figure out who the heck is that person? Who's this guy? Where'd they come from?
Right.
They're playing somewhere else. They're developing their skills. They don't have the pressure of being that 5-star recruit with everything on their shoulders. And if they're a bust, everyone's going to look at them and laugh, or they think they're a failure. Everyone takes time in their development process, and they have to find the right fit to be successful. And you start seeing that with the transfer portal. And that's one of the positive benefits of the portal.
Let's go to the game that bookend the night there, though. Let's take us all the way out to the coast of California. Fresh, Miami travels over 5,000 miles for this game. They're down big. And again, I can't remember. I know they outscored they were down, I want to say 35-10. I believe it was 35-10 was the worst deficit at some point. And you see Miami outscore Cal 29-3. They got a 2-point conversion there in that third quarter touchdown. Winds up later on being the difference in the football game. A lot of people are going to look, again, this is another one, Cal. They're going to look at them and say, oh, it's the Cal Golden Bears. You don't watch them as much because they're all the way out there in Berkeley. Their games aren't usually national televised. There's some talent over there. Then on top of that, we're asking these kids, we've talked about this before, these guys aren't professionals. We do have to criticize them now more that they're getting paid for these NIL deals. But you look at the fact that you traveled over 5,000 miles in a week's time. And this was something, the dangers that you even brought up about the amount of travel when these conferences did all of this realignment. You ask these kids to do all that travel. I mean, they've never done something like that before. Play a football game, be locked in, be completely away from your home. And game day being there for the first time ever at Berkeley. And Miami pulls off a heck of a comeback. Fresh, are you saying that is this a resolve win for Miami, or is it also exposing some of the flaws of Miami?
Well, I think it's an exposure. They should have lost Virginia Tech. They should have lost Virginia Tech because, look, the call on the field, whether anyone saw that or not, the call on the field was touchdown. And there's no video evidence whatsoever that showed that it wasn't a catch for a touchdown. So they escaped that game. And you thought that this would have been, all right, we've got to come in with resolve and show that we are truly a top 5 team in the country. And they came in with all the hype around Cal, and they laid a dud in the first 2-3 quarters. Now, if this was a better team, no disrespect to Cal, but if it was a better opponent, they probably wouldn't be able to make the comeback, even better defensively. Cal still lacking somewhere in that overall depth. If it was a better football team, they probably are able to hold on and complete that upset. Miami had just enough late, which is impressive from Cam Ward, but you can't keep doing this. Even though the ACC is not exactly the greatest league in the world, you do that against Clemson, who I think is probably a pretty solid defense in the league compared to everyone else. They're going to shut you down. You're not going to be able to pull it off. They've come out reading too much of the press clippings lately and letting other teams who are talented but not elite hang around or jump on them early, and they're having to struggle. You can't keep coming back miraculously every single time and expect to be undefeated, expect to win a national championship, because you're going to get to a point where Miami has to play Ohio State, Miami has to play Texas, Miami has to play Oregon, Miami has to play Georgia or Alabama or Tennessee, Penn State, whoever. They're not going to have that luxury of, oh, we're down by 20, we're going to be able to come back on them. It's not going to happen. So you've got to, they have to develop. I mean, it's probably good for a core that they have the confidence they can, but you can't keep doing this because that cardiac, situation can only get you so far. And I think it has some doubt in my mind as Miami is elite. We have to look back. They beat FAMU, Florida, who else did they really have dominated up to that point? And Virginia Tech and Cal have been the two biggest opponents, and they've looked good, but not elite in both those matchups.
I think we're going to find out so much more about Miami even going into, I believe next week they have Louisville, or is it 2 weeks? Do they have a bye coming off of this? No, they have a bye before they go out to Louisville here. I checked real quick. But I understand what you're saying here, Fresh, and I think you do have a very valid point, but let me pose something to you differently on that. You're coming off a game where, yes, you did survive the Virginia Tech game. And when we previewed that game, we talked about if Virginia Tech wanted to hang around, they need to do the run game, which they did. They needed to get after Cam Ward, which they did in that football game. And again, questionable call at the end, but there are always games like that we have a questionable call. The thing I saw with Miami is the first half, I felt like they were truly impacted by the amount of travel that they had to do in the first half. And again, when we talk about an 18, 19-year-old kid, load you up on a plane, go across the country, completely across the country, and play a football game against a upstart Cal team. And I'm going to use the word upstart for them because, again, they have some talent on there, but you're right. They're not to the level when Aaron Rodgers was there or anything like that. Miami kind of lays a dud in the first half and then turns it on and puts the boots to them in the second half to make the miraculous comeback. Well, I think this is a resolved win for them because, yes, you do it up against a lesser opponent, and I get it. But if they're going to play against a Texas or a Ohio State or maybe even let's say a Clemson, most likely you're going to be playing those guys on a neutral field. Most likely you're not going to have a game 6 days prior, then have to travel across the country on it. You will play in a neutral site bowl game, even if you're playing in the Rose Bowl. You're going to be out there a week before that game's ready. So you're going to be able to get into a routine.
Most Miami games are neutral site home games anyway, so they're very used to that.
Right. So I would say that this game is something where we got out with a win, we survive in advance, as we've said multiple times. You win the games that are on the schedule for you. But I think this could be a growing experience. Now, 2 weeks from now, when you go up to Louisville, and Louisville looks like they're a wounded animal after that loss to SMU, this could be a really big game for them. And if they lose that game, then you're definitely right. Then this team is just, we're hanging around, and sooner it catches up to us.
Well, my true gauge for this Miami team is when they play Florida State. And that's 3 weeks from now?
Something like that.
Because Florida State is downright awful. Downright absolutely terrible. I don't care who's quarterback. Your offensive lines can't block. You can't run the ball. Like, the defense is average at best. If you don't go out there after all the times that Florida State recently has beat the trash out of Miami, if you don't just unleash some pain for the fan base, for everything in that rivalry, and just absolutely destroy them, then I'm gonna be worried about it. Because then you're like, all right, we're playing a substandard football team right now. We have got to dominate and show our force in a rivalry game where you should be jacked up. And if they don't come out there and just absolutely whoop them up, then I'll be like, all right, where is the mindset of this football team? Is this just another Mario Cristobal, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane kind of situation? And that's where I'll really understand if this Miami team is truly legit and built for a big run.
Fresh, I like the fact that you use that line there because it makes an easy transition to our next one. Let's talk about the man who has been Tarzan and looked like Tarzan and dominating everyone like Tarzan. Heck, you can put him in Iron Man. You can put him as the Terminator. You can put this guy as anything. Let's talk a little bit about Genty at Boise State right now. Okay, we talked about this in our preview episode. Go all the way back to when we previewed Boise State. Fresh, is Genty the best running back in college football right now?
I ranked him top number 6 overall coming into the year?
5 or 6, right in that area.
5 or 6. Right now, he's hands down number 1. He's the number 1 offensive player in the country right now.
Right.
Not just the best running back, because Ollie Gordon, Marion Hampton, where you guys are, you might as well just stay on the bench. You're not even playing.
Right.
But even if they were, Genty is taking the ball and going 60, 70 yards 3 times a game for touchdowns.
Fresh, real quick. Hold on. This is Genty's stat lines. If you're listening to this and you don't know what he's doing right now, and I'll let you finish here. Genty has 95 carries. He doesn't even have 100 carries on the year. He has 1,031 yards. He's averaging over 10 yards a carry. He has 16 touchdowns right now, 10.9 yards per carry. I'm sorry there, Fresh, but I wanted to jump in and give people the stat line why we're talking about this kid.
No, 1,000 yards rushing on October 5th.
6th.
Well, today's the 6th,
Yeah.
but that's the 5th. That's insane. He's done it in the pass game, done it in the ground game. He had had a great year last year. Wasn't an early starter. He kind of got the role late in the year last year, but now he's just coming out and just dominant. And they're winning big. I think it also helps that they have a chance of being in the playoff. Outside of, Army and Navy are great stories from the group of 5 situation. But with Memphis losing, UNLV losing, Tulane not there, like this is a chance for Boise State and him to get a national showcase. And he is also raising up eyeballs on Boise State.
Right.
With the voters, with the fan bases, with just general college football fans in general. You're going to see Boise State, and everyone usually remembers, Kellen Moore and Johnson, the running back in the Oklahoma upset. No, this is a legit team with a legit player. We all thought actually, Malachi, the quarterback, was going to be the stud. He didn't even win the job. And Genty now is just taking him. I don't care who the quarterback is. Just give me the football in my hands, and I'm just going to go score a touchdown for us. He has a chance to continue to run through the Mountain West, put themselves in the playoff spot. And if they keep moving up, when the teams keep losing, they might not just be the 12 seed. They could be a 10 or 11 seed because they'll actually be better than some teams that are, ranked below them. This is a story to follow, but he is an absolute phenomenal athlete.
That was the question I was actually going to ask you next there, Fresh. If you take a look at Boise State's remaining schedule, if they continue just to blow people out in the Mountain West, and the other thing is you talked about being in Vegas in a few weeks here. The week you're in Vegas, UNLV plays Boise State. What a time to be alive and be out in Vegas during that game. I mean, that's good. It's got to be. I hope that's a late night game because then if you're in Vegas, you're like, okay, yeah, that is a 10 p.m. kick for us East Coast.
Local.
So 7:30 there for you guys. You could be over at Ellis Island getting dinner and then some roulette over there. But talk about a ridiculously amazing athlete. He needs to be the Heisman frontrunner. With what he's doing out there, he's got to be a Heisman frontrunner. And on top of that, I was going to ask you this question here, Fresh. If Boise State runs this, and we kind of all just accepted the fact that with the 12-team playoff, the group of 5 representative would be that 12 team. Boise State, if they run the table in the Mountain West, their only loss is a 3-point loss to Oregon in Eugene. How high would you think that Boise State could get up to?
I mean, currently right now having number 17 in the country. That's only going to go higher if they can keep stacking wins. And I think the highest they probably can get.
Could they get a home game?
I don't think they're a top 8 team. I still think they're going to go on the road. But I think they can get up to like number 10.
Okay. Fair enough.
If they're a 10 seed, that sets up pretty nicely for them.
Right. I would say, depending on what they look like, and again, I think the eyes of the nation will be upon them when they play UNLV in a couple of weeks here. And then also you take a look at that game at the very end of the season for Boise State against Oregon State. It is over Thanksgiving weekend. It's a late night. That's an interesting game there as well. If Boise State runs the table, has big wins, and then caps the year off with a win over a team like Oregon State, who isn't a Mountain West team. They've been depleted a little bit, but again, I think that's a brand win right there. I legitimately think that Boise State could get up to that 8th spot. If they're 11-1 and Genty's the Heisman front runner.
But you're having a lot of other conference power players. Money talks.
Right. But
I don't care what we say. I don't care what we say about the committee.
Right.
Money talks. Influences by the big power conferences getting home games for larger schools.
Right.
As fun, as amazing as we want to have them being the 8th seed hosting the 9th seed on the blue turf, which is Penn State if there's power brokers in there, they're going to flip that to being Penn State being the 8 seed and Boise State being the 9 seed. Let's be truthful, folks.
But
The story of this team getting a home game, they are going to have to be perfect. Everyone else is going to have 3 losses. And even then, they're going to look at strength of schedule, and there's going to be power brokers on the side. You're going to be like, I don't think so. We're going to find ways to recalculate because it's not the top 25 rankings. It's seeding. And that's where the 4 conference champions come into play because they're not going to be the top 4 teams in the country.
right.
It's going to be interesting how that all plays out. I guarantee you,
I can't wait to watch that.
That is going to be the situation where who is going to get that? Oh, we're going to put them at 9 seed because, 8, 9, who cares? But I'd rather have the game in Happy Valley as opposed to Boise, Idaho in December on a blue turf, which we can't sell as many tickets to. I have a bad feeling unless they are 11-1, everyone else has 3 losses, and it's eye test blatantly better, and they play a tougher schedule, which they won't. That's going to be something that's going to come into play with the voters. And
I'm going to pose you something opposite too, though. You said money talks, which I think you're spot on with that. What's another thing that the committee is going to want is they're going to want really, really high TV ratings for this game. Could you imagine the TV rating that you would pop? You would pop it. Again,
the ratings are going to be high for the playoffs regardless.
Right, but
you could astronomical.
You could pop I think you could pop a really high TV rating if you got Boise, if you put it at Boise, Penn State. And then again, the committee could have, again, I get what your point is, and I think there's a lot of validity to it. I'm also saying, though, I'm the comedian saying, hey, we're willing to, anyone's got a shot at this. And that's been the knock on them saying, you expand the playoff only to cater to the big boys, which you're right. That's where the money is. This is a way for them to say, well, we're really not doing that. We're not catering to the big boys, especially. Now, I will say this. You're right about Penn State. I think if it comes down to Boise and an SEC or Boise and a Big Ten school, I think you're right. They're going to lean to that. What if it came down to Boise and
Iowa State
or BYU?
BYU, I think that's an easy move. They can send them up there because honestly, that's not going to be any different for them.
Right. And I think it depends on who you're comparing to.
Yeah. And that's where the Big 12, all right, great point. Big 12 schools outside of Kansas State, because they're probably going to be the conference champion. If it was Colorado, Boise, they would probably put that game in Boulder for prime. If it's BYU or Iowa State, they're definitely putting that up in Boise, Idaho on the Smurf here.
Yeah. I think that's going to be one of the most fun things. I think as a college football fan, just a general college football fan, because you don't need Boise State's not going to play anyone that you're really going to have a rooting interest against. I think it's something that all college football fans can kind of come together and watch Genty and just appreciate the dude. This kid is a stud. We have not seen a running back like this in a couple of years. This guy is amazing. All right,
we're kind of looking at for going back to the seeding thing for basketball. We have regional sites and first round sites all around the country. There are teams that might get a different seeding because it's closer to their campus or closer to their fan base, and so they get more of those fans to travel in an easier situation. So basketball committee's done it. They all find ways to move people around the chessboard to set them up locations geographically to be able to reach out for those opening round matches. So that's kind of where I also see, if it gets down to it, how will they maneuver teams in order to avoid having Boise host a game? All
right, Presh, we're going to play a game here real quick. I have a list of teams.
Please don't be Saul. We're not playing a game like Saul, right?
No, not like that. Okay. We're too far away from Halloween for that. But I want you to tell me and I want you to rank these teams on a 1 to 10, 10 being major fraud alert. So we're going to do a fraud alert. This team is charged something on your credit card. This is a major fraud is a 10. Someone just made a mistake is a 1. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start here. The Louisville Cardinal. Where they rank on a 1 to 10 fraud alert?
8. When you lose to Notre Dame and you lose to SMU at home, I think that they're dropping out of the top 25. That's a conference loss, and lose to Notre Dame. They don't look as strong as they were last year.
Right. Let me flip that real quick on you though. Does SMU replace them? Because SMU now 5-1, and their only loss is to BYU, who is undefeated right now.
They might be a ton of top 25, not anything higher than that. I don't believe in SMU right now. I think they're a good team. They have quarterback issues that they've addressed, and they beat a horrible Florida State team. And they went to. I'll give them the Louisville win a solid win. How do they go from there? But I'm not saying they're going to be a legit playoff contender or anything.
They have their schedule is fairly easy the rest of the way. Fairly easy.
We'll see how this turn out.
All right. The Tennessee Volunteers, where they alert on the fraud alert?
I give them a 4. Their defense is night and day compared better than what has been in the past. I'll give them that. They can run the ball all day long. The passing attack and Nico have been absent, lacking sizzle. I think defenses are now playing they haven't adjusted their passing game yet. They're dropping a lot of guys. They're playing a lot of 2G safety, and they're forcing him to check off of pass plays and run the football. They're giving the running game there, but they've got to get better and find ways to balance that passing attack, which is what they're known for, because I don't think that this is a sustainable when they go play up and they host Alabama or they play Georgia later. Is it going to be sustainable for them just to run the football and have no passing attack? That's what worries me. But I said like a 4. I think they're still a very good football team.
See, I actually, as much as I love Josh Heupel, there's too many things that are starting to come to the surface that are making me think that maybe this team isn't as good as they should be. Although I am going to give credit. We talked about in our preview, though. We were waiting for Arkansas to put 4 quarters together, and they did. And we said that sooner or later they were going to pull off an upset on somebody. All right, Fresh. Lincoln Riley, USC Trojans, fraud alert.
They were a fraud alert before the season started. They're tan. Give me a tan.
Tan.
Oh, they're terrible. I mean, you got your best defensive player going into the portal because he's crying about playing time. He's been trash since he got there. Your offense can't score. It's bad. Same old Lincoln Riley.
Right.
Burnt brisket and terrible defense.
Right. Minnesota runs for 193 yards and 3 touchdowns on them.
Minnesota.
Right. All right, Fresh. I'll give you another one here. The Wolverines are reigning national champion.
I'll give them a 9 because they beat USC. But
right.
Dear Lord, that offense is painful. Like, they have no quarterback play. They have no receivers. Loveland is a great possession tight end. Mullins is a good offensive lineman. They have a running back. That defense is not as dominant as it was last year. They're showing there's a lot of depth issues on the football team. Will they get back in a couple of years? Yeah, but the cupboard was extremely bare when Harbaugh left. And it's telling me right now, number one, Harbaugh did cheat, and he knew. That's why him and his coaches all left. They gave Sharon Moore the head coaching job as a kind of way of, hey, you've done a great job. We're going to get you the head coaching job so you don't get fired because you're not an NFL level coach and probably wouldn't be a head coach anywhere else. So they kind of gifted him that. And then they ran knowing that the depth is horrible. And he's like, all right, Harbaugh's like, I'm going to leave now. Hopefully it lessens the blow of penalties. We'll let Sharon Moore get a 5-year basically deal so he doesn't get canned after having a terrible football team that they have right now. I think they played up their emotions versus USC. USC wasn't very good. They found ways to win. They almost blew that game. There's no reason they go to Washington and lose like they did. That's a horrible effort across the board. Horrible.
All right. I'm going to give you one. Now, this one, I want to see what your opinion is on them. Colorado. This is a tough one. They have an ugly loss to Nebraska on their schedule.
I'm going to give them a 5.
Okay.
The reason why I'm saying 5 is because UCF looked like trash for Florida. Absolute trash. So that just kind of was that great win over UCF the week before, being a great team. UCF was trash for Florida. They've shown they're not very good football team. But I like what Colorado has done. I mean, week 1 versus North Dakota State, week 1, they looked mid as mid can be. They couldn't play on the offensive line. They couldn't block anybody. The defensive line wasn't there. Offense wasn't scoring. And they've actually made some adjustments this season to look more organized than they were last year. Will they win the Big 12? No. They have K-State, I think, this week anyway, which is going to be interesting. But they have shown progress. I'm not saying they're Fraudville. I'm not saying they're a national championship contender or a playoff contender, but they have actually shown growth. Next year, when Shador and Travis Hunter are gone, they will be back to being trash because I don't think they're getting two elite players like that on that team. But for right here, right now, they've shown growth and progress, which is something I think we've all kind of overlooked in the past couple weeks.
And you know who's the last team that's coming next? The Missouri Tigers. 10.
20. Good Lord. Oh, I mean, we kind of knew it. Actually, the overtime loss to Vanderbilt's looking like a better loss now. A better win, but they squeaked that one out. Barely beating Boston College and then going down there to A&M after a bye week. And you didn't just lose. You got the train run over you 50,000 times. Completely unprepared. The defense has been terrible. We've talked about that a few weeks. Luther Burden and Theo Weiss, where have y'all been? Completely non-existent on offense all season long. They're one shiny year. They're back to being mid. Honestly, they could go 11-1, and I would still keep them out of the playoff because that loss was so bad to an above average A&M football team, especially on offense. They couldn't tackle. They couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't throw the ball. Absolutely horrendous. And I'll tell you right now, if they start stinking, they went out and got a couple 5-star kids last year because they have NIL stuff in the state of Missouri. Wouldn't shock me if this team bottoms out. Those two high-level players, especially in a worry, maybe hit the transfer portal and find a different setting after getting a paycheck the first year.
Right. This Missouri team is a joke. This is a joke of a team. And I got on there last night and I was having a conversation with Twitter with some of the fans that we talked to and saying that how Missouri, this is my problem with the AP. The AP raises them up. And we've said from weeks, this Missouri team is not that good. They are a fraud. And I talked a lot about in our preview episode about SEC bias. And this was a great example of SEC bias because Missouri, there's no way if you watch college football, if you are able to look at a team and kind of keep your bias out of it and say, what is this team actually there? When we talk about, and when I said in this, our preview, when we talk about SEC bias, we aren't referring to Alabama. We're not referring to Texas or Georgia or anything like that. What we're referring to is a situation like this. A&M starting to look a little better. I like Mike Elko a lot. I think he's a great coach. I think he is the right guy at A&M. And I think give him a year or two, let him recruit, let him get his guys in there with the Texas NIL deal, with the money behind A&M. A&M's going to be a force in a few years. I think he's got them playing tough. I think Missouri's going in the complete opposite direction. I think they could fire their coach in a year or two, too.
You know, the funny thing is we saw two different parts of the spectrum. Missouri, having a lot of doubts about them. Ole Miss coming out from the loss. They both go into hostile environments this past week. Ole Miss comes out in a South Carolina team that actually showed a lot of life early in the year, beats the junk out of them. On the other end of the spectrum, Missouri just laid down and surrendered immediately. We have our doubts about Ole Miss, but at least they showed resolve and they showed fight and they fought back and actually got themselves off the mat after the loss to Kentucky and went out there and beat a solid South Carolina football team. So it just shows you mentality, leadership, and overall depth and talent on a football team.
Yeah, absolutely. Fresh, we got to keep going here. We're rolling through this as well. We got to bring up a stat here, though. And I know this is near and dear to your heart. Army Navy 5-0 since World War II. Since World War II, Army Navy are 5-0. Give me quick, Army. What are your thoughts on both two of the military academies being undefeated at this point in the season?
Efficiency, grit, discipline is
throwing
what's
the ball
all about. I mean, you got a little more passing, but it just shows football is a simple game, folks. It's blocking and tackling, discipline, own the line of scrimmage. We get all these convoluted, complex passing games and these, developments of our defensive coverages and how we want to overlap blitzes and disguise stuff. If you can block and you can tackle and you can own the line of scrimmage and run the football, you will find success more often than not. When you throw the ball, two of the three situations when you throw the ball are bad, either intercepted or incomplete. When you run the ball, it's either you gain yards or you lose yards, but at least you're keeping the clock moving and you run the football. You can gain more potentially from passing play, but there are more areas for negative impact. These two schools have developed the standard for years. Develop our own players, operate accordingly, be disciplined, run the football, play our standard, do not play down, have them play up to us, have them have to respect us in our attack offensively and defensively. And we'll fight every minute of the ball game. So it's awesome. Navy absolutely destroyed Air Force. So
it was impressive.
They got after it early and they went down there and took it to them. It's going to be interesting to see if they keep this going because there is potential they could both play for the AAC championship the week before they play each other in the Army-Navy game.
Sign me up for it. Listen,
back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, sign me up for it. Because again, folks, we realized before that we're not talking about Army and Navy being like playoff contenders, but Fresh and I both put a lot of respect on those programs and the history and how special that game is. And we really do appreciate the two of those military academies and all the things that they do for us. And the fact that those guys are going off to be enlisted members after graduation and the fact that they play football as well is just so impressive to both of us. It's fun to be able to celebrate it. And it goes back to the purpose of this podcast is there's great football being played all over the country. It's not in one geographical area. It's not just these 10 universities that are elite. We came and did this because we knew that we've talked Boise State. We're talking Army, Navy. Yeah, we're talking about Alabama being upsetted and we're talking about being fraud alerts here on different programs. But that means that there's college football, I feel like right now going into season, while there's a lot of questions coming into what the season would be like, I honestly feel college football has never been better than how it is right now.
For all the schematics of it, the optics of NIL and kids getting paid tons of money and transfer portal chaos, which I think we need to, if we can find structure on NIL and find structure on transfer portal, like one portal and that's it, and only doing it in spring and not in December, it would help refine it. But it's like anything in life. You're always going to have areas of opportunity to work on, to adjust, to improve. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. College football in its entire existence has never been perfect. And that's probably why it's amazing because it is chaotic and there's so many things going on. Any kid, any play, any spot, any day. That's right. That's pretty good.
It's impressive.
It's glorious. And, I'm just watching the highlights right now and you're seeing an A&M punt that dropped at the 2-yard line, somehow just sort of pivoted and went off at the half-yard line. You can't make this stuff up. You can't script it. It's poetic justice every single Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely. All right, Fresh, we are almost to the halfway point of the season. Before we get into our top 15, I want to have this conversation with you. When you get to the halfway mark, at the beginning of the season when we do our rankings, we kind of give our own, where's that team going to be? And you play a game, you see them once or twice on the field. Most teams have played a minimum of 5 games already. Okay, some have played up to 6 if you haven't had your bye week yet. When we're ranking teams here, you can't, there's no flex scheduling. Your schedule's set, you have to play in front of you. At what point now are you putting the fact that you're honoring teams that are undefeated compared to teams that maybe have one loss? Like when are we start? It goes back to the old conversation we had a couple of years ago when we were talking about Cincinnati. Is Cincinnati had their big win against Notre Dame early in the season, and people want to be like, oh, well, they can't change the schedule that they have. You got to honor the fact that they haven't lost a football game yet. So where are you now at the midway point with focusing on who's won all of their football games, taking into account their losses?
I'll give it 2 more weeks. I'll get to the weekend of the 19th of October. So like week 7 or week 8 is the last 5 weeks of the year. We have so much chaos that comes into play. And you talk about scheduling. Nobody thought when Missouri scheduled Boston College as a home and home that this team would actually be pretty solid this year. no one thought that Vanderbilt would have the talent. Like, oh, it's Vanderbilt and Boston College back-to-back weeks. Missouri. We even talked about the schedule. Like, they should be undefeated going to Alabama. Well, they're not. And you see it's a team. We look at the team name on the schedule, but how has that team developed? What are they hitting the portal? How are these kids actually growing together? What's the new coaching scheme? Like, all those things that are variables that come into play every single season. Our team's undefeated because maybe teams on their schedule were supposed to be good. We thought, oh, that's going to be a tough grind, but they actually were terrible and they just beat everybody.
Right.
So I want to give a couple more weeks, especially for this upcoming Saturday is a loaded slate on the 12th. And then the week after, you have Alabama going up Knoxville and Georgia going to Austin. You might actually, if those both are close games, you could solidify technically all four SEC playoff spots just by the optics of it being four very good football teams playing. Now, if there's blowouts or chaos, whatever, which probably will happen, that's going to change the narrative, but it's an eye test thing as well. Ohio State, they played three MAC schools. They played a Michigan State, upstart Michigan State team, and they played an Iowa team that just can't score. They're undefeated. They've looked very, very good. They've looked dominant. They've looked impressive. I feel that they've done what they're supposed to do. If they came out and it was the first half versus Iowa where it was like 7-0 and that game ended 20-3, I would have had concerns about Ohio State a little bit. I put them on a scale of 1 or 1 to 10. I put them at a 1, but the Iowa name makes it like, oh, they beat Iowa. Have they really beat Iowa? Like, Iowa's a terrible football team. I'm sorry, folks. They're a terrible football team. But they beat the name brand. Iowa has no offense, and their defense is held to a different standard based on previous seasons. They're not a very good football team. But the image of who they play on the schedule, when Ohio State doesn't have that game until, Nebraska? And now we're using Nebraska as the parameter and the gauge check for how good they are. Or Penn State. We all know Penn State is going to melt against Ohio State. It's going to happen. It's who James Franklin is, but then we're looking at the schedule of where these teams are at. Ohio State, if that was any other football team, we would have doubts on who they are. It's Ohio State. They're going to be dominant and they're going to run through. The only game that's truly going to matter for me when it comes to Ohio State is if they beat Michigan and how bad they beat them. Because that Michigan team is not very good. Other teams, look at your schedule. You really don't even know. I mean,
wait, what about going into Eugene next week?
Oh, I forgot about Eugene. Yeah, sorry. Never mind. Apologies. I forgot that they're actually in the Big Ten for some reason. It's still weird. So yes, Oregon is a major checkpoint for Ohio State and then Michigan. But the Penn State game doesn't mean anything to me. It means more to Penn State and they find ways to suck it up anyway. So scheduling, where they're at, we'll know. I think we do get caught up too much, AP voters, ourselves, of looking at all summer long who they have to play, who's on the schedule. Oh man, that's a team from last year. They were really good. It's going to be a great game. And that team ends up being terrible.
Right.
But you know what? It's because we're all bored during the spring and summer. And we have nothing else better to do except for look at schedules and compare off of previous years. So that's why I'm going to give a couple more weeks. Get me through at least till the 20th of October.
So I am now starting to give credit for the performances on the year. I'm giving credit for where the performances are. And for me, what's going to happen when I rank my teams here, it's going to be much more volatile. It's going to move way more. And I'm going to have a way more flexing with these teams there. But I'm now to the point where I'm not going to punish a team just because you're undefeated, but people will argue about your schedule. Like, you won. Now, again, I'm going to take this with a grain of salt. I'm not going to look at a team maybe like Indiana, who is undefeated right now, and rank them ahead of Alabama as well. But it really does come into play. My top teams, for me to put you in that top list right now, you need to be undefeated. You need to win the games that are in front of you. I definitely don't think it's a guaranteed. After watching the SEC this weekend, man, I definitely still don't think it's a guaranteed factor that they're going to get 4.
They're good 4. It's a lot.
I still don't think so, because here's the thing, Fresh, with that. There's some teams I think that we're seeing, again, some teams from other conferences that we thought would only get 1. I still think the ACC probably only gets 1. I think the Big 12 may get 2. Then you also got to take in the Notre Dame factor. And then you got Boise.
That's 5.
There's 5. And then now you have 7 spots between them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, ACC champions, 8. Or
ACC champion. You already counted them.
So you got ACC,
champion, 2 Big 12,
2 Big 12,
Notre Dame,
Boise.
Or group of, we'll say Boise. That's 5. So 7 more spots.
7 more spots.
You tell me there's 4 teams in the Big Ten that are going to take over.
I don't know if there's 4 teams in the Big Ten. I'm saying, though, what about if SMU wins out? If SMU wins out and winds up winning the ACC, I don't think they're leaving Miami out. I think they'll have Miami and SMU in. I think 3 is a lock. 4 is going to be a coin flip. I think it's 50-50.
Well, that's why it's still early in October. A lot of things a lot of chaos is going to happen. Question for you, actually, I was thinking of, is when you rank your top 25, because even though we only do our top 12 on air, our top 15, we still do top 25. Are you finding it much more difficult to do 13 to 25?
Yes.
Because like top 12, I can, for the most part, your top 12 is pretty easy. I mean, you can move a guy here and there, team here and there. But once you get to 13 to through 25, you get 13 through 30 with the 5 honorable mentions. It's a pretty wide crapshoot on how you're actually ranking every single one of those teams.
I'll tell you this. I have 18 listed in front of me right now. I will tell you this. 12 I was pretty good at. 13 I debated quite hard here. It really is. Yeah, you're right. Right around the 13 to 15 mark is when I start going, no, I was really questioning myself. Where do I put Boise? Going back to the Boise State conversation. Right now, I have them at 18. I have 18.
I have a 16.
Yeah, I legitimately contemplated, though, because they've blown out everyone on their schedule. Their one loss is a 3-point loss on the road in Eugene. They played really well in that football game, gave the Ducks all they could handle. I had a conversation with myself about putting them in my top 10.
They've shown something. I don't think they're a top 10 team. If they go and win the Big 12, the Mountain West, and they're 12-1, that means they have a win over Washington State, Oregon State, correct? Plus the entire conference. That includes UNLV, which is shown to be a pretty good football team. They have a conference title to their name. They have one.
San Jose State's looking okay.
But they have a top 3 player in college football right now on their team.
Right.
And then you go back to where you talk about the Oregon, the Oklahoma, Boise State Fiesta Bowl. They have the brand awareness.
Right.
People have known about Boise State for a long time because of the Smurf turf and because of the upset. Now you add that, it's like, oh, it's Boise State. It's Boise State. If that was Utah State and they had a great player and they were 11-1 and Mountain West champions, would that still resonate the same way? I don't think so. I think Fresno State and Boise State have that brand awareness from past success where people think and they know that's a football program. That's a good team out on the West Coast. You know what? They have success. I'm valid. I'm feeling very valid in my opinion to put them in. If it's Utah State or Nevada or San Jose State, you're kind of like, it's cute, but I'm not really feeling it. And that the personal, because I think that's where the BCS computer thing, it weighed because it took the human element out and people hated it because it didn't really factor in everything, but you have to have a blend with human and computer. But the human element's like, it's Boise State. I know who they are. I can relate to them. They've had multiple successes up to this point. I feel very confident in putting them in my playoff as opposed to another school which has very, very small on the radar. Like, I'm not really feeling it. I'm going to get laughed at. I'll put them at 13 so we just keep on the outside. I'll put another team I feel more comfortable from the group of 5 situation higher than them just to be safe.
So let me ask you this then. We're talking Boise State. Where do you have BYU?
I have BYU at 24.
Why?
I don't believe.
They blew out Kansas State, and they have a win at SMU. That's their only loss on the year right now. SMU's looked really good. So they have 2 high-quality wins and are undefeated right now. I know. History tells us otherwise.
But they have a great football history. I just don't trust that team to follow through in the end. They've looked good. I don't have much feeling for SMU. Like whatever. The Utah win was impressive, but the way that they came back and almost blew it
Kansas
for
State.
Baylor, well, Kansas State, but the week that they came after that and almost lost to Baylor when they were up dominating them early,
True.
that left a sour taste in my mouth. Maybe I was betting on them, so maybe that's part of it, and I had some of that bias, but it kind of just looked like, all right, you had one great night, you win tons of games at night. I didn't see that full consistency. If they keep rolling, they'll move up, obviously. I'm just still not sold on BYU as an elite football team.
I have them up to number 6. Here's why. Again, I outlined that win against Kansas State was a dominant, taking them to the woodshed type moment. They're 5-0 and 3 wins are on the road. Now, I've probably watched a little more SMU than you have, and I think pretty highly of the SMU team. I have BYU up to number 6. Now, again, though, I also led this off that my rankings, because I'm giving people benefit of winning their football games, there's going to be a lot more movement in my rankings. BYU loses next week to Arizona. I'm probably dropping them all the way down to the 20s. Right.
6th.
I have them at 6.
6th.
Yep.
So is that are you now obligated to open the door and let the Mormons gentlemen come in your house and talk to you?
I don't have that obligation. I might talk to you for a minute on the front porch, but I ain't gonna.
Okay.
Yeah. Fresh.
Wow.
So
6.
Would you like to hear my top 15?
Yes, please.
All right. Now, again, folks, I'm leading this off by saying I'm giving credit for teams being undefeated and also taking into account who they've played and how they've looked. Okay? So I'm going to say this. I'm giving credit for what you've done right now and winning football games, because at the end of the day, a close loss is nice to have you, and I do give you credit for that later on. But at the same time, too, at the end of the game, the team that's going to win the trophy is going to be the one that wins all their football games. You don't get a trophy at the end for a close loss. My number 1 team in the country right now is still the Texas Longhorns. I still have Texas. I think they've looked like the best team in the country. Number 2 is Ohio State. Ohio State has been the second best team in the country right now. Again, you want to knock Iowa a little bit. I understand that. I get that. Michigan State, knocking them a little bit. They're an upstart team. But Ohio State has done everything that you've asked them to do and have won big in every single game here. Number 3, and I'm going to take some flack for this one. I'm ready for it, though. Penn State is up to number 3 for me. Because, let's talk about Penn. Again, I'm ready to defend this one, too. Penn State, 5-0 on the year, done everything that we've asked them to do. Penn State's number 3. Oregon is number 4. Oregon is 4. The University of Miami is number 5. BYU is 6. All of my top 6 teams are undefeated teams and have a marquee win somewhere along the way.
Who's Penn State's marquee win?
I would give it going into West Virginia week 1. And then beating Illinois in a tight game 2 weeks ago. I give them credit for both those wins. Play on the field, Fresh. Number 7 is Alabama. I have Georgia at 8. Iowa State is my number 9. Iowa State, again, I give a lot of credit for them being undefeated in the Big 12 there. I have been very impressed. They have a win against the Cyhawk. Now, Iowa State is the first team that I would say that I started to question their undefeated, because, again, their wins are only North Dakota, Arkansas State, Houston, and Baylor. Number 10, I hated to do this. Clemson is number 10. Clemson's 10. SMU is 11 for me. Their one loss is to BYU, which I have at 6. Number 12 is Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss at 12. Kansas State is at 13. Their one loss, again, is to BYU, which I have at 6. And I have Nebraska at 14. LSU is at 15. And that's my wins right there. 16, the three teams I have that I really struggled with what to do. Indiana, Tennessee, and Boise were my next three teams.
Wow. You dropped Tennessee out of the top 15.
I did. And as a person who really does like what Josh Heupel's doing over there, I again, that loss to Arkansas, their defenses look better. They're running the football, but there's still questions too that I needed to have. If they would have lost to Arkansas 38-35, I probably would have kept Tennessee up there. But the fact is that they only got 14 and you were losing 3-0 at halftime.
Were they looking ahead to Alabama in 2 weeks?
Maybe.
I think they probably were. I think they were living on the Kool-Aid and they were looking ahead.
But consequences for actions.
Again, like an open monologue. Any given Saturday, you got to show up. Look, Penn State at 3. I'm kind of wondering what's in your coffee, but everything else, you know what? I understand and I respect.
Oregon, I really played around with Oregon and Penn State. I really went back, and I probably flip-flopped those two for a while. But again, to me, it's that I'll give this credit. And again, I don't trust James Franklin as far as I can throw him. But what I'll tell you is this: that Penn State defense has looked remarkable for the majority of the season. Now, that Bowling Green game will be the first thing that someone will bring up to me, and I'll say, yep, you have a valid point for that Bowling Green game. Outside that Bowling Green game, that defense has looked lights out. The other team I had a lot of problems with, like where to put them, is, again, Kansas State, Nebraska, and LSU. LSU, their one loss is to USC, who we think are major frauds. So that loss is looking bad, but they're 4-0.
I mean, and I think their major comeback for South Carolina showed they had some
right
tester. They had some fortitude, put it that way. But yeah, they have not looked dominant in defense, but they have been able to score some points.
Right. All right, Fresh, who you got your top 15?
Texas number 1, Ohio State number 2, Georgia number 3, Oregon 4, Miami 5, Alabama 6, Penn State 7, Tennessee at 8, Clemson 9, Kansas State at number 10. Notre Dame at 11, Iowa State at 12, Utah at 13, Ole Miss at 14, LSU 15, and I had Boise State, Indiana, and Pitt. Pitt being undefeated to put them at 18.
Pitt was another team I struggled with.
But here's all right, so I think that's the best way to talk about it. These are the teams where I think we all should talk about and rank. You have SMU, we have Pitt, Indiana, Nebraska, you brought up BYU, obviously you have ranked very high.
Iowa State.
Iowa State's another solid team where they've done what they're asked to do. They keep winning. Whose glass slipper falls off first among that group?
I hate to say this because I really love Matt Campbell. I really feel like it's Iowa State for some reason.
I don't know if she's going to get them. They don't have that drive to keep building on stacking wins.
I don't. So they have to go to Morgantown next week. And West Virginia has looked really tough at times. And then also they've been
they've come up the mat a little bit.
Right. They've been hot and cold. Yeah, they looked really good yesterday they were in Stillwater for that game at Boone Pickens Stadium, and West Virginia looked really good. I legitimately think Iowa State could be the first one. I think they could lose next weekend.
Man, it's that one group where they're the Cinderellas. Like we get NCAA tournament, and you're always like, all right, who's the school? The schools that we're glad to see them there. They haven't been in there for a while. They haven't been relevant in a while. And you see those names pop up, and you're like, do I really believe it? Who has that special season brewing that they can survive all the potential potholes along the way?
Right. And again, I know it's tough for me, but one of the things that I've taken into account now, it really is, can't do anything about your schedule. And I have 5 or 6 games now that I can judge you on. Mm-hmm. So, fair. All right, Fresh. It's been we knew that this was going to be one heck of a recap episode. So we'll close it off there, folks. Hey, before you head out of here, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave us a review, leave us some comments in there. Am I crazy for putting BYU at number 6 right now? Should Penn State be a top 5 team because they're undefeated here as well? Or should we start taking advantage of teams that whether or not they won all their football games or not? Guys, make sure you're checking out SpinnableSports.com because the Irrational Confidence Podcast is part of SpinnableSports.com. Special thanks to our producer, Drew. Without him, none of this is possible. Interact with us on the X. We like to interact with you. We got Week 7. Week 7 is loaded, folks. We're going to know who are really contenders going into the second half of the season, who are actually pretenders. Which of these undefeated teams are going to be knocked off first? It's a remarkable time to be a college football fan fresh. I'm loving this.
This is what we want. We want the chaos. We want the joy, the upsets. Love seeing the goalpost being taken out of the stadium down to the rivers. I love, the storming the field. This is what it's all about. It is the unknown every single time we step on the field.
Yep, absolutely, folks. It's been a great one.
And with that, everybody, log in, enjoy, interact with us everywhere. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, hit the website, SpinnableSports.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.